Rental prices in Canada are going up, and it looks like it's getting worse, not better, and that's what we're talking about in today's video. A report from rentals.ca just came out, and it said that the average asking price for a rental property across Canada has hit a new record high. We're going to talk about that report in today's video, but I'm also going to share with you the 4 reasons why I believe rental prices have gone up in Canada since about 2019. And at the end of this video, I will share what I believe is the silver lining here, why help may be on the way. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tom Storey. I run a real estate team here in the city of Toronto. If you find this video valuable or learn anything new, all I ask is you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to this video. You can also book a call directly with me in the first link in the description. A lot of the news coverage in the past 18 months has been interest rate focused. We're talking about people that have variable rates or the people that are coming up to the end of their fixed rate term and how that's going to impact the market. But there's another side of things going on here outside of property ownership. It's the rental market. And what has happened with the rental market to me is like a little bit insane, especially where it was in 2019 to where it is today. Let's talk about how this happened. So this is the July 2023 rent report by rentals.ca. And they're saying that the average asking rent in Canada hit a record high of $2,042 in June. That's across all of Canada, right? Like that's not just Toronto, Vancouver. That's the entire country. This was a 1.4% increase month over month, but the number that stands out the most to me is this. The annual rate of rent inflation to accelerate to 7.5% from the 6.5% annual rate recorded in May. So year over year, rental prices in Canada are up 7.5%. Over the past 2 years, the average asking rents in Canada have increased by 20%, or by an average of $341. And let's be very clear here, 20% over 2 years for an entire country is not sustainable. So I don't believe that if you're an investor looking to buy a property, you can count on these types of increases moving forward. I don't think it's healthy for a market either. Now, they've done a full report here and they've ranked basically the most expensive markets. To nobody's surprise, Vancouver was the most expensive market and actually was very much in the lead, especially for the 1 bedrooms being almost $3,000 a month, with 2 bedrooms at about $3,800. Burnaby was second, Toronto was third, Mississauga and Etobicoke, which is basically GTA. So you can see Ontario is taking up a whole lot of this, but then you got Vancouver and Burnaby on the top 2 of the list. This chart right here from Urban Nation is very, very telling of what's happened with the rental market. So you go back to June 2019, your average asking rent for all property types in Canada was about $1,800. You can then see what happened as the pandemic started and it really dropped off and kind of ended there in March 2021. And then we've just been on a steady climb all the way up. So we went from $1,800 to over $2,000 on average, basically since just before the pandemic started until now. I could look at charts and graphs with you all day long, but I wanted to share with you the 4 reasons why I believe this has actually happened. Number 1 is the obvious one. With interest rates going up for everybody, we've had significant hikes getting to now 5% for the overnight rate, is that a lot of people that were just on the cusp of home ownerships, especially with the stress test, can no longer afford to get a property because they're not being approved for the money that they need to buy that property because the home values haven't fallen as fast as the interest rates have gone up. Those people are now staying in the rental market, creating more demand. So that's pretty simple when you think of it that way. And the second reason with the interest rates is that there are a lot of landlords on variable rate mortgages that have seen a significant increase in what their payments are every single month. And when they're having turnover with their tenants, they're trying to ask for as much money as possible. Now, again, I know landlords are always seen as the problem here, at least with some of the comments on this channel. But it's not just that they're asking for it, but they're getting it. The market's giving it to them. So you're seeing these turnovers happening in these buildings and people are like, well, my expenses are up $700 a month. What's the absolute maximum I can get? And another thing we have to talk about too is as the pandemic was happening, we saw rent decreases across the board, right? That's why it dipped down in that chart that I showed you. But now landlords are not giving rent decreases or incentives to get in. They just want the highest price. And so far the market has been giving it to them, which is causing the price points to go up. The second reason why rent prices have gone up is rent control. Now, before you start typing in the comments and tell me how wrong I am, I just want you to hear me out here because I know what I just said doesn't make sense if you just read it as a sentence. How does rent control make prices go up? So here's the way that I look at it. There's been different rent controls all across Canada. I'm going to give you an example here in Toronto. So how it works right now in Toronto is that any property that was built before November 15th, 2018 is under rent control. It was 2.5% in 2023 and 2.5% rent increase allowed in 2024 moving forward. Now, there are a lot of people that got a rental in the pandemic at a very decreased price from what it was before. And for them to move right now, it would cost them like $800 more for the exact same property. So they're not moving. So rent control for them is a good thing, 100%, which is causing people to move around less, which means less new listings that come to the market. And especially the renters that used to jump up to being a buyer. So they're leaving the rental pool and going to the buyer pool. That's no longer happening at the pace it was before. So now even if they move, they're just playing musical chairs, right? You're not bringing any more chairs to the game. And at least in Ontario, I'll give you another reason why rent control I actually think is part of the problem here. And again, just hear me out on this. In 2017, there was a blanket rent control put into place when Kathleen Wynne won as the Liberal Party in Ontario. This was switched when Ford came in, and I just talked about that before, what the new date is. But when this announcement was made that there was a blanket rent control on everything, there was all these potential purpose-built rental projects that were going to come to the market that got canceled or turned into condos. So all this inventory that would have been on the market now that was being thought of in 2017 didn't end up happening, especially at the pace that it was going to. Number 3 is probably the biggest reason why you've seen the rent increases is our immigration numbers, right? Like, I think we have to acknowledge it. Our population growth has been massive in Canada. We just passed 40 million people. We have an aging population. We need immigration for this country, but it's getting to the point that, people come here, they're going to have to live somewhere, right? Ontario grew by 500,000 people last year. BC grew by 150,000 people. That's all well and good. Where are they going to live? And probably, at least in the first 5 years of moving to a new country, figuring out their family and neighborhoods and jobs and all that other kind of stuff, they're going to rent before they buy. So you've had this massive amount of demand come in. And obviously, based on the numbers that we've seen in this report, we are not building at the pace that is needed based on the demand that we have based on our population growth. And the number 4 reason why I think the prices have gone up is because the purpose-built rentals. Okay, so I just mentioned before that less of them were built because of rent control, but some were built. And we didn't have purpose-built rentals for like 40 years in Toronto. It was all the older apartment buildings, right? But now these massive corporations, these REITs, are building these entire buildings and they're purpose-built rentals. But they're purpose-built like luxury rentals. This is not affordable housing by any means. And they're expensive, in a lot of cases, more expensive than a typical condo rental with an individual landlord, right? And these purpose-built rental companies, they're not forgetting when they can increase the rent every single year, where some landlords would say, I got a good tenant, I'm not going to have to worry about it, right? They're not forgetting. So all these new purpose-built rentals slowly coming to the market, they're going to impact the rental prices because they're more expensive than a typical condo. In most cases, not all cases. Is there a silver lining here? Is this going to get better? Hopefully. Now, it's not going to happen in a year. It's not going to happen in 2 years, but in 5 years to a decade, we could be making progress. And it's not going to be just based on the developers or what the government builds, because we all know that's going to take forever, at least on the government side of things. It's going to be you and me and your friends and your family and your neighbors, because all the single family zoning here in Toronto, you can now put 4 units on your property. In BC, we just interviewed the housing minister for our podcast. I go check out that interview if you haven't seen it already. It's coming to BC as well. 3 to 4 units on every single property across the entire province. So we are bringing more density. We can argue on if that's a good thing or bad thing all day long. Hopefully, especially on the rental side of things, this will at least help prices not move up at the pace that they were previously. Thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Tom Storey. I'd love to know in the comments how you're feeling about rental prices right now in Canada. And remember, home is where your story begins.